Outlaw finds rejected bride chained to a tree. What happened next shocked an entire town. The sun was starting to dip behind the thick line of trees that bordered the small town. The forest at the edge of town was dark, quiet, and full of the kind of shadows that seemed to move if you stared too long. Few people dared to venture this far, but one man did, moving carefully on horseback along the narrow dirt path. He was a man known in the town as an outlaw. People whispered about him, told stories of his past misdeeds, and warned their children to stay away. But few really knew him. Few had taken the time to look past the rough exterior, the scars, the sharp eyes that missed nothing. Tonight he wasn't thinking about the town or its gossip. He was simply trying to stay out of sight, moving quietly along the forest path where no one would follow. He had ridden this way many times before, though tonight the forest felt different. There was a strange stillness in the air, as though the woods themselves were holding their breath. The outlaw's horse shifted nervously beneath him, its ears flicking at every small sound. He slowed, listening. A twig snapped in the distance. Not a deer, not a fox. A voice, a faint cry, almost lost among the rustle of leaves. The man froze, holding his breath. The voice came again, softer, desperate. Almost a whisper carried on the wind. It sounded like someone calling for help. Curiosity and concern moved him forward. He guided his horse along a narrow path, hidden by dense bushes, following the sound. As he pushed through a thick curtain of branches, he saw her. She was a young woman, her dress torn and dirty, her face streaked with tears and grime. She was chained to a tree, her wrists and ankles bound in rusty metal that had clearly been there for some time. Her eyes widened when she saw him, a mixture of fear, hope, and disbelief. For a moment neither spoke. The outlaw studied her carefully. He had seen a lot in his life, but this sight struck something deep inside him, a mixture of anger, sympathy, and determination. "Who did this to you?" he asked, his voice low but firm. She didn't answer immediately. Her lips trembled as she tried to speak, and finally, in a small, shaky voice, she said, They said I was unwanted, that I didn't belong at the wedding." The outlaw frowned. He had heard stories of cruel townspeople, of families who humiliated their own members, but seeing it with his own eyes was something else entirely. The woman's words painted a picture of rejection and shame. He looked at the chains. They were old, but strong, holding her firmly against the rough bark of the tree. The ground beneath her was uneven, covered in roots and dirt, making her position even more uncomfortable. He dismounted slowly, keeping his movements calm so as not to startle her. "I'm going to get you out of here," he said. He knelt beside her and examined the chains. They were rusty, the metal worn by age, but not impossible to open. As he worked to free her, he kept his eyes on the forest around them. The shadows seemed thicker, and the air was colder than before. Something in the way the wind whispered through the trees made him uneasy. He knew the town would not stay quiet once they realized she was missing. As he picked at the lock with a small tool he carried, the woman finally spoke again. "Why? Why are you helping me?
Everyone says you're dangerous." He paused for a moment, holding the lock in his hands.
"People are wrong about a lot of things," he said quietly. "I don't live by their rules. I do what I think is right." The woman's eyes softened slightly, though fear was still evident. There was a long pause as he worked, metal scraping softly, until finally the chain gave way. He carefully lifted the lock and dropped it to the ground. She rubbed her sore wrists, tears threatening to fall again. "Thank you," she whispered. She was clearly exhausted, but there was a spark of determination in her eyes now. I thought no one would ever come." The outlaw helped her to her feet. She was small, fragile-looking, but there was a fire in her that was not easily dimmed. He offered his arm, and after a moment's hesitation, she took it. Together they began moving away from the tree, deeper into the forest, away from prying eyes. As they walked, she told him her story. Her name was Clara. She had been promised in marriage to a man she barely knew, a union arranged by her family. When she refused, or perhaps failed to meet their expectations, the town turned against her. They humiliated her publicly. And finally, someone, no one was entirely sure who, had chained her here, leaving her alone for hours, perhaps days. The town had whispered that she had been abandoned, that she was disgraced, but no one had gone to look for her. The outlaw listened, silent, his mind turning over her words. He had always lived on the outskirts, but this was different. This wasn't a crime for profit or a law he had broken. This was cruelty, plain and simple. "Don't worry," he said finally, his voice steady. "I'll make sure you're safe."
"We'll figure this out."
Clara glanced at him, still wary. "Safe? From them?" "Yes," he replied.
"From anyone who thinks they can hurt you, you're not going back there."
The forest grew darker as night fell, and the sounds of the town faded behind them. They moved carefully, avoiding main paths, slipping between trees and over roots. Clara stumbled occasionally, her feet sore, but he stayed close, ready to catch her if she fell. Eventually they came to a small clearing where the moonlight spilled onto the ground. For the first time since she had been chained, Clara felt a small measure of relief. She could breathe here, could move freely. She looked at the outlaw, really looked at him, and for the first time saw more than the stories. She saw someone who had acted without hesitation, someone who had risked himself for her when no one else would. "Why are you really helping me?" she asked softly. The outlaw looked away, his face shadowed by the moonlight. "I don't know," he admitted. "Maybe because I can. Maybe because I hate to see people hurt. Maybe because I've seen enough pain in my own life to know when someone else doesn't deserve it." She simply nodded, understanding more than words could say. The forest around them seemed to breathe, the wind rustling through the trees, as if it were alive, watching. The night was quiet, but there was tension in the air. They weren't yet safe. The town would be looking for her, and if they found her first. The outlaw broke the silence. "We need to keep moving. There's a cabin not far from here. Someone I trust. We can rest there tonight, and then we'll figure out the next step." Clara hesitated, but finally followed. She trusted him, though she barely knew him. She had no other choice, and somewhere deep inside, a small hope began to grow. Hope that maybe, just maybe, someone truly cared about her well-being. As they walked through the forest, the moon rising higher in the sky, the outlaw kept his senses alert. Every rustle, every shadow could be danger. But for the first time in a long time, he felt a sense of purpose that had nothing to do with his past crimes or the town's judgment. He was doing something that mattered, saving someone who had been left to suffer unjustly. By the time they reached the small cabin, hidden behind thick brush and surrounded by tall trees, Clara was exhausted, but grateful. The outlaw knocked softly, and a familiar figure appeared at the door, someone he trusted completely. Together they helped Clara inside, offering her food, water, and a safe place to rest. That night, as she lay on a simple cot, she thought about how close she had come to being forgotten, left to suffer alone. And yet, here she was, alive, safe, and beginning to understand that courage and kindness could come from the most unexpected places. The outlaw, sitting by the fire, kept watch, his eyes scanning the darkness outside, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges. But for now, at least, they had found a small measure of peace. Outside, the forest was quiet. Inside, two people who had been strangers only hours ago began to form an unspoken bond, one that would carry them through the trials yet to come. And though the town would not soon forget the scandal, the truth of that night would remain hidden in the shadows of the forest. A story of courage, compassion, and the first step toward justice. The small cabin nestled deep in the forest was quiet, but not entirely still. Outside, the trees swayed gently in the night breeze, their leaves rustling softly, as if whispering secrets of the world beyond. Inside, the fire flickered in the hearth, casting warm light over the worn wooden walls. Clara sat on a small cot, her hands still trembling from the ordeal she had endured. She could barely believe she was safe. For hours, she had been alone, chained to a tree, abandoned by the people who were supposed to care for her. Now, here she was, alive, unharmed, and in the company of someone who had risked everything to save her. The outlaw sat across the room, sharpening a small knife, his face lit by the glow of the fire. He seemed calm, almost detached, but Clara could see the alertness in his eyes. Every sound, every shadow outside was being carefully watched. He was a man who had lived with danger for so long that it had become second nature to him. Yet tonight, his focus was entirely on her. "I can't believe you did this," Clara said quietly, her voice trembling. "I mean, why me? Why risk yourself?" The outlaw looked up from the knife, meeting her gaze. "Because it was wrong," he said simply. "What they did to you? Leaving you there, chained, scared. No one should ever be treated like that. And someone had to stop it." Clara swallowed hard, tears threatening again. She had been humiliated, rejected, and abandoned, and now she realized that there were still people in the world who would stand up for what was right, even if it meant putting themselves in danger. "You could get caught," she whispered. "People in the town, they know who you are. They'll come looking for me, and they'll find you too." He shrugged, his expression unreadable. "Then we'll be ready. I've dealt with people like them before. We'll make sure they don't find us tonight." For a moment, silence fell between them. Clara stared at the fire, thinking about how close she had come to being forgotten, and how strange it was that a man labeled an outlaw could be her protector. She wanted to ask more questions to understand who he really was, but the weight of exhaustion made words difficult. Instead, she simply asked, "What now?" The outlaw leaned back, his eyes scanning the cabin, then the forest outside through the small window.
"Now," he said, "we rest. Tomorrow, we plan."
"We need to think carefully about what comes next. You can't go back to the town. Not yet."
"And I can't stay here forever."
Clara nodded, though she didn't fully understand. She had never faced danger like this before, never experienced fear mixed with relief, and now she was trying to process it all at once. The hours passed slowly. Clara eventually drifted into a light, uneasy sleep, the outlaw keeping a quiet vigil by the fire. Every now and then the sound of an animal moving in the woods would make him tense, ready to act if needed. He had chosen this cabin because it was hidden, secluded, and trusted, but danger could come from anywhere. The forest, quiet as it seemed, was unpredictable. Morning arrived with the soft light of dawn spilling through the cracks in the wooden walls, Birds called to one another, the air fresh and crisp. Clara awoke feeling slightly stronger, the warmth of the fire having eased her aches from the night before. She sat up, stretching carefully, and looked around. The outlaw was already awake, preparing simple breakfast over the fire. "You slept well?" he asked, glancing at her briefly. Clara shook her head with a small smile. "Not really. Too many thoughts. But I feel safer than I have in a long time." "Good," he said, handing her a bowl of porridge. "You need strength for what's ahead. Today, we start figuring out how to keep you safe, and maybe find a way to make sure the town can't hurt you anymore." Clara took the bowl, warming her hands around it. As she ate, she told him more about her life, about the engagement, the humiliation, and the people who had turned against her. He listened quietly, asking only a few questions to clarify details. Every story she told painted a clearer picture of the cruelty she had endured, and every time he felt a growing anger at the injustice. When breakfast was done, he stood and moved to the door, peering into the forest. "We can't stay here long," he said. "The town will start searching soon, and if they track us, we need to be ready to move." Clara nodded, her stomach twisting with a mix of fear and determination. She had never faced anything like this before, but she trusted him. Somehow, she knew that he was capable of keeping her safe, no matter what came. They stepped outside, the cool morning air filling their lungs. The forest seemed different in daylight, less threatening, yet still full of secrets. They moved carefully, avoiding main paths and keeping to the shadows as much as possible. The outlaw led the way, his knowledge of the terrain evident in every step. Clara followed, still learning to trust her instincts, and the man guiding her. Hours passed as they moved deeper into the forest, finding small streams to rest by and hidden clearings where they could eat and catch their breath. The outlaw taught her how to move quietly, how to listen for danger, and how to trust her senses. Each lesson strengthened her, building confidence she didn't know she had. As the sun reached its peak, Clara asked, "Do you ever wonder if it's worth it? Helping me? Putting yourself at risk?" The outlaw didn't answer immediately. He thought about the years he had spent on the outskirts of society, feared and misunderstood, doing things to survive. But in that moment, helping her wasn't about survival. It was about righting a wrong. "Sometimes," he said finally, "but seeing someone safe, seeing them alive, it makes it worth it." More than anything else, Clara looked at him, her eyes wide.
"You really mean that?" He nodded. "I do."
You shouldn't have been left there, and I won't let them hurt you again.
By late afternoon, they reached a small river, its waters clear and cool. The outlaw suggested they rest here, hidden by tall grass and trees. Clara splashed her face in the water, the cold liquid shocking her senses and washing away some of the fear that had clung to her. As they sat by the river, the outlaw explained his plan. "We can't go back to the town. Not yet. You need to be safe, and I need to make sure the people who hurt you don't follow. I know a place where you can stay for a while, someone you can trust, someone who will keep you hidden until we figure out what to do next." Clara listened carefully. Her heart raced with hope, but also with fear. She had been betrayed so many times she wasn't sure she could fully believe in safety yet. But the outlaw's calm, determined presence gave her a strange sense of reassurance. Suddenly, a sound in the distance caught their attention, the faint beat of hooves on the dirt path leading to the forest. The outlaw's eyes narrowed, and he motioned for Clara to stay low. They watched as a small group of townspeople appeared, searching. He whispered, "They're looking for you. We need to move, now." Heart pounding, Clara followed him deeper into the forest. The outlaw led her through hidden paths, over fallen logs and under thick branches. Each step was careful, calculated, ensuring that they left no trace. The townspeople shouted, their voices carrying through the trees, but they couldn't see where the pair had gone. After what felt like hours, they finally reached a small cabin tucked away at the edge of the forest, far from prying eyes. The owner, a friend of the outlaw, welcomed them quietly, understanding immediately the danger they were in. Clara felt a wave of relief as she stepped inside, the warmth of the fire and the safety of walls around her giving her a small sense of peace. That night as she lay down, Clara thought about the events of the day. She had been abandoned, chained, and left to the mercy of cruel people. But now, she had been rescued. She realized that courage could be found in unexpected places, and that sometimes strangers could become protectors. The outlaw sat by the fire, keeping watch once again. He knew this was only the beginning. The townspeople would not stop searching, and their journey to safety was far from over. But for now, Clara was safe, and that was enough. Outside, the forest was quiet, but full of life. Inside, two people who had been strangers hours ago began to form a bond built on trust, courage, and the shared knowledge that danger could strike at any moment. The night passed slowly, filled with quiet reflection and careful vigilance, and both of them knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight, at least, they were alive, and they were together. A small victory in a world that had offered so much cruelty and uncertainty. The morning sun barely pierced the thick canopy of trees when Clara awoke. Her body ached from the night spent in a small, unfamiliar cabin, but for the first time in days, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long while, a sense of hope. The outlaw was already awake, moving quietly around the cabin. He had prepared a small breakfast, simple bread and water, but it was enough to give them energy for what lay ahead.
Morning, he said, glancing at her.
His voice was calm, steady, but his eyes betrayed a sharp alertness. He had slept lightly, listening to every sound outside. Clara realized that even here, deep in the forest, danger could come at any moment.
Morning, she replied, sitting up and rubbing her wrists.
They were still sore from the chains, and every movement reminded her of what she had endured. Are we safe here? For now, he said, handing her a piece of bread. But we can't stay long. They'll search the forest, and if they catch even a glimpse of us, it could be trouble. Today we keep moving. Clara nodded, swallowing hard. She had come to trust him, but the thought of facing townspeople, angry and determined, made her stomach twist with fear. I don't even know where we're going, she said softly. You'll see, he replied with a small, reassuring smile. Somewhere you can rest, somewhere safe. We just need to be smart and careful. They left the cabin after breakfast, stepping into the cool morning air. The forest was alive with the sounds of birds calling, leaves rustling, and the distant flow of a stream. The outlaw led the way, moving with a skill that spoke of years spent navigating this land. Clara followed closely, learning quickly how to step lightly, avoid branches, and stay hidden. Every now and then, he would glance back to ensure she was keeping up. As they moved deeper into the forest, the outlaw spoke quietly about what they needed to do. We need to keep changing direction, keep to hidden paths.
They'll be searching along the main roads and even the small trails. If we stay unpredictable, we'll stay ahead.
Clara listened carefully. The fear she had felt the night before began to mix with a growing determination. She realized she couldn't rely entirely on him. She had to be alert, aware, ready to act. I can do it, she said, her voice firmer than she expected. I'll pay attention. I won't slow you down. He glanced at her, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. Good. You'll need that focus. Out here, one mistake can change everything. Hours passed as they moved silently through the forest. They crossed streams, clambered over fallen trees, and navigated around thick brambles. Clara was exhausted, but she kept going, fueled by a mixture of fear, hope, and determination. The outlaw remained watchful, scanning every shadow and listening for every unusual sound. By midday, they reached a small clearing where the sunlight fell like golden ribbons through the branches. They stopped to rest, sitting on fallen logs and drinking from their canteens. Clara looked around, her chest heaving. "Do you think they'll catch us?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "They might," he admitted, "but we'll do everything we can to stay ahead. You have to trust me, and I have to trust you. We're a team now." Clara nodded. The thought of being a team with someone she had only known for a short time felt strange, but it was comforting. For the first time, she felt that she wasn't entirely alone. They didn't have long to rest. In the distance, a faint sound reached their ears, the unmistakable clatter of hooves on dirt and the shouts of men. The outlaw's eyes narrowed. "They're coming," he said, standing quickly. "Get up." "We move now." Adrenaline surged through Clara as she scrambled to her feet. Her fear was sharp, but she trusted him completely. Together they moved swiftly through the trees, staying low and using every advantage the forest offered. The sounds behind them grew louder, the shouts more frantic. The townspeople were determined, and they would not stop easily. The outlaw led them through hidden paths, twisting and turning to confuse anyone who might be following. They crossed a narrow stream, stepping carefully on slippery rocks, and ducked under low branches. Clara's heart pounded, but she kept pace, her focus entirely on the man guiding her. She could see his determination, his skill, and she realized that he wasn't just surviving out here. He was protecting her with everything he had. After what felt like hours, they reached a dense thicket where the trees grew so close together that it formed a natural barrier. The outlaw motioned for her to stay quiet and pointed to a small hollow beneath a large tree. "We can hide here for a few minutes, catch your breath, but stay still." Clara crouched down, her body trembling, and listened as the sounds of pursuit passed nearby. The men shouted, calling her name, but the hollow kept them out of sight. The outlaw kept watch, his eyes scanning every movement. He whispered, "They're frustrated. They don't know where we went. That's good. But we can't stay long." After several tense minutes, the sounds faded, and the forest returned to its natural rhythm. Clara exhaled, relief washing over her. She looked at the outlaw, who was crouched beside her, his face serious. "We need to keep moving," he said. "There's a place ahead, further into the forest, where you can be safe for now. Someone you can trust will shelter you until this all settles." Clara nodded, swallowing hard. She didn't know who this person was, but she trusted the outlaw. She realized that he had risked everything for her, and she owed him her full cooperation. Together they continued through the forest, careful not to leave any trace behind. As they walked, Clara noticed small details about the man beside her. His hands were rough, calloused from years of work or survival. His eyes, though sharp and wary, softened occasionally when he glanced at her. She saw a quiet strength in him, a resolve that went beyond fear or danger. For the first time, she wondered about the man behind the outlaw, what he had endured, what had made him this way. Finally, late in the afternoon, they reached a small, secluded cabin hidden behind thick bushes and trees. The owner, a trusted friend of the outlaw, welcomed them quietly, understanding immediately the urgency of the situation. Clara felt a wave of relief as she stepped inside, safe walls surrounding her once more. The owner quickly prepared a simple meal, and Clara sat at the small wooden table, eating slowly. Her body ached, her hands were sore, but she felt stronger than she had in days. The outlaw watched her quietly, ensuring she was okay before he sat down himself. "Tomorrow," he said finally, breaking the silence, "we'll decide what to do next. For now, rest."
You've earned it. Clara nodded, her eyes filled with gratitude.
"Thank you," she said softly, "for everything. I don't know what I would have done without you." He gave a small, almost imperceptible smile. "You don't have to thank me."
I did what I had to do. Just stay ready.
"We're not out of danger yet." That night, as Clara lay on a simple cot, she thought about how far she had come. She had been abandoned, chained, and left to face cruelty alone. But now she was alive, safe, and beginning to understand that courage could come from unexpected places. The outlaw kept watch by the fire, alert and vigilant, ensuring that no harm could reach her while she rested. The night passed quietly, but both of them knew that danger was not gone. The townspeople would continue searching, and the journey to true safety was far from over. Yet, as Clara drifted into sleep, she realized something important. She was not alone. She had someone who would protect her, someone she could trust, and for the first time in a long while, hope felt real. Outside, the forest was alive with whispers of the wind and the distant calls of animals. Inside, two people who had been strangers hours ago were beginning to form a bond built on trust, courage, and the shared knowledge that danger could strike at any moment. And though the path ahead was uncertain, they faced it together, ready to survive, ready to fight, and ready to protect one another no matter what came next. The forest was quiet in the early morning, the mist clinging to the trees and the soft calls of birds filling the air. Clara woke slowly, stretching her sore muscles and rubbing her wrists. Her hands were still tender from the chains, but she felt stronger than the day before. She had survived. She had escaped, and for the first time, she believed that she might truly be safe. The outlaw was already awake, standing near the cabin doorway. He was scanning the forest, his eyes sharp and alert. Every sound, every shadow, every rustle of leaves drew his attention. He had spent years on the outskirts of the law, but protecting Clara had given him a new purpose, a reason to be vigilant that went beyond himself.
"Morning," he said, turning slightly to look at her. "We don't have much time."
"The town is already searching, and if they figure out where we went, they'll be coming here soon. We have to move before they even think to look." Clara nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. Her heart pounded with fear, but it was tempered by trust. She knew he would keep her safe, and she knew she had to stay close and alert. Together they stepped outside, moving silently through the trees. As they progressed deeper into the forest, the outlaw explained their plan. "We need to make it look like we went one way, then sneak another. They'll follow the obvious trails, but we'll use hidden paths, cross streams, and take shortcuts through thick brush. It's the only way to stay ahead." Clara listened carefully, her mind working quickly to remember every detail. She had learned much about moving quietly, hiding in shadows, and reading the forest over the past days. She realized that she wasn't helpless. She could contribute, and she could help them stay safe. Hours passed as they moved through the forest. The townspeople were somewhere behind them, shouting occasionally, but they were confused and disorganized. The outlaw led Clara through paths only he knew, ducking under low branches and stepping over roots with precision. Clara followed, careful not to make a sound, her muscles aching, but her determination growing stronger. By mid-afternoon, They reached a small hill overlooking the forest. The outlaw stopped and crouched behind a large rock, motioning for Clara to do the same. From here they could see the town in the distance, the main road winding its way through the landscape. A small group of men had set out on horseback, their shouts faint but clear from this distance. "They're looking for you," the outlaw said quietly, scanning the scene. "And they'll keep coming until someone finds you, but we're going to change that today. We're not just hiding anymore. We're taking control." Clara's eyes widened. "Control? How?" He gave her a small, reassuring smile. "You'll see. We have to act smart. They think you're helpless, but we can turn the situation around. Sometimes the best defense is to surprise them." They moved down the hill carefully, sticking to hidden paths and shadows. The outlaw had a plan, but it required patience and precision. He knew the townspeople would be overconfident, expecting to find Clara easily. He intended to use that to their advantage. As they neared the outskirts of the town, Clara felt her nerves tighten. The people who had abandoned her, humiliated her, and left her chained were somewhere nearby. She had every right to be afraid, but the outlaw's calm determination gave her courage. She realized that she had faced fear before, and she could face it again. Suddenly, a shout rang out. One of the townspeople had spotted movement in the trees. Clara's heart raced as she crouched lower, pressing herself against the underbrush. The outlaw signaled for her to stay quiet and still. He stepped forward, his presence commanding and deliberate. "Clara!" a voice shouted. "Come out! You can't hide forever!" The outlaw didn't move quickly, didn't panic. He allowed the men to see him first, drawing their attention while keeping Clara hidden. He knew they would underestimate him, a single man against several in the open forest. But he was prepared, and he had the element of surprise. With a sudden, swift movement, he led the men on a chase, drawing them away from Clara. She watched, heart pounding, as he moved through the trees, leading the townspeople in circles, confusing them at every turn. His skill in the forest was unmatched. Every jump over a root, every hidden path he took, kept Clara safe and the men frustrated. After a tense pursuit, the outlaw led the men to a narrow ravine. The terrain was difficult and the men struggled to keep up. Using the advantage of his knowledge of the land, he led them into a trap of sorts, a section of the forest where the ground was uneven and the trees closely packed, making it impossible for them to follow easily. He used this moment to circle back, returning to Clara's side quietly.
"You okay?" he asked, his voice calm but firm.
Clara nodded, though her hands were shaking. "Yes, I think so." "That was incredible. How did you do that?"
"I know the forest," he said simply.
"And I know how to think ahead. You need to trust me, always." They moved together, keeping to hidden paths until they reached the small cabin once more. The owner, who had been watching for any signs of pursuit, greeted them with relief. Clara stepped inside, feeling the warmth of the cabin and the security it provided. Over the next few hours, the outlaw explained the final part of their plan. They wouldn't just hide anymore. They needed to confront the situation in a way that protected Clara and exposed the cruelty of those who had abandoned her. The town had made assumptions about her. Rumors had spread, and her reputation had been damaged. It was time to set the record straight. "We'll go to the town," he explained, "but not recklessly. We'll do it in a way that makes them see the truth, that shows them you are not helpless, that you deserve respect. We can't control everything, but we can control how you are seen." Clara felt a mixture of fear and determination. She had been frightened for so long, but now she realized that she could take part in shaping her own story. She had survived, she had escaped, and now she had the chance to reclaim her life. Late in the afternoon, they moved toward the edge of the town. The outlaw kept them hidden until they were ready to act. Then, with careful timing, they entered the town in full view of the townspeople, who were gathering for a meeting about the missing girl. Clara stepped forward, her posture strong, her eyes clear. The townspeople gasped. They had expected to see her frightened, weak, and desperate, but she was none of those things. She was composed, confident, and supported by the outlaw, a man they had feared and misunderstood for years. The outlaw spoke first, explaining what had happened, how Clara had been abandoned, chained, and left to suffer unjustly. He described the cruelty of the townspeople who had turned against her, and he praised Clara's courage for surviving it all. Whispers spread through the crowd. Some townspeople were shocked, some ashamed, and some tried to deny what had happened. But Clara, standing tall, told her own story. She spoke calmly, clearly, and with quiet strength. She described her experience, her fear, and the betrayal she had endured, and she made it clear that she would no longer be treated as powerless. The reaction was immediate. People who had gossiped and judged her felt shame. Those who had humiliated her were forced to face the truth. Clara's courage, combined with the outlaw's intervention, had shifted the balance. The town was stunned, their assumptions shattered. When the confrontation ended, Clara felt a sense of relief and empowerment she had never known. She was free from fear, free from shame, and free to live her life on her own terms. The outlaw, standing by her side, gave a small nod of approval, his mission complete. Afterward, as the townspeople dispersed, some murmuring apologies, some avoiding eye contact, Clara turned to the outlaw. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft but filled with emotion, "for everything. I don't know what I would have done without you." He smiled slightly, a rare moment of warmth crossing his rugged features. "You did it," he said. "You survived. You were brave."
I just helped.
Clara realized that she had grown stronger through every challenge, every fear, and every moment of danger. And she understood something even more important. Courage could come from unexpected places, and sometimes strangers could become heroes. That evening, the outlaw prepared to leave. The town had been shaken by the events, and although some still whispered about him, he knew his work here was done. Clara watched him, gratitude and respect in her eyes. "You'll be safe now," he said, "and you'll be able to live your life without fear. Remember what you learned and trust yourself." Clara nodded. "I will. And thank you for giving me hope when I had none." With a final nod, the outlaw mounted his horse and disappeared into the forest, leaving Clara standing tall, free, and empowered. The town would talk about the events for years to come, about the girl who had been abandoned and the outlaw who had saved her. But for Clara, the story was simple. She had survived, she had been brave, and she had reclaimed her life. As night fell over the town, the forest outside remained quiet, filled with the sounds of life. Inside, Clara felt a sense of peace she had never known. She had faced fear, danger, and betrayal, and she had come out stronger. The bond she had formed with the outlaw would remain in her memory forever, a reminder of courage, hope, and the power of doing what is right, no matter the risk. For Clara, the future was no longer something to fear. It was something to embrace, full of possibility, freedom, and the knowledge that she could survive anything as long as she trusted herself and those who truly cared.